Howdy, folks, and welcome to our first of a few Arcane special podcasts. I'm Brent Barrett.
I'm Kevin Bachelder.
And I'm Wendy Hembrock.
And in case you didn't hear on our weekly podcast, if you're not a listener, we are going to be doing 3 podcasts of season 1 of Arcane. Each one's going to be covering one of the acts. They do them in 3 episode acts. So we're going to be doing that. We're going to have 3 podcasts and a warning, fair warning. We might spoil things later on in season 1. Nobody's seen season 2 yet, so we can't really spoil that, although we might spoil the trailer. Anyway, we might talk about things as they apply to later in season 1. So if you're following along with us, hold off listening to this until you've watched all 9 episodes and then come back, because we might do that.
Yep, don't want anybody spoiled if we can avoid it. No surprises there.
And just so you know, we are going to be covering Episode 1, Welcome to the Playground, Episode 2, Some Mysteries Are Better Left Unsolved, and Episode 3, The Base Violence Necessary for Change. And just in case you're not familiar with Arcane, just a quick little introduction. Arcane is, first of all, it's named after the magic in the universe, as you'll find out, or you found out in Episode 1 or 2. But it is based on a video game called League of Legends, which is a very popular video game. I have not played it per se. I think I own it. I think I installed it. I think I ran it, but I don't really like it. So it's not really my kind of game. But the cutscenes and the universe and the characters are all very cool in the game, and even cooler when they decided to adapt or be inspired by the game to create this series, this Arcane series. Big fans of the game say this series is nothing like the game. So don't play the game because you like the series. My son, who plays the game all the time, warned me about that. As soon as I told him I liked the series, he said, "Don't play the game if you think the series is the game, because it's nothing like it." So just a little bit of background.
Yep, and some good info. For those folks watching or listening who aren't regulars of our Tuning into Sci Fi TV podcast, I am well known for many years as not being someone who watches many, if any, animated shows. So I came to this one well after it had premiered because of recommendations from folks like Brent and others in my social circles. So I was certainly a surprised one to be coming to this, and actually fell very hard, as we'll get into for our conversation. So I haven't played the game, seen a few videos about it on YouTube. That's about my exposure to any of that before I jumped into Arcane hard and deep.
Yeah, so I like animated stuff. Maybe not as much as Brent, but I'm definitely not averse to it the way Kevin sort of is, with a knee-jerk reaction about animation. But I am not a video game player. I did not know anything about this video game. Coming from a video game doesn't bother me, because we've had so many shows that have been successfully adapted. But it also hasn't interested me at all in trying to play the video game.
And as the game players would say, that's good. So that's wonderful news. I think what we'll first do is dive a little bit into what our general thoughts are about these 3 episodes as a bundle, since we're talking about them as a chunk. And personally, I thought that this show, right out of the gate, did a pretty good job, especially with its opening scene, of making you go, "What the heck is going on here?" And introducing you to this underworld and this overworld, essentially, and these main characters of Vi and Powder mostly, but also Vander and the others that you would get introduced to early on. So I think it did a really good job of quickly establishing this universe and letting you get to know these characters and getting to know, who's your favorite and who's not, maybe. But I don't think it did. The first 3 episodes did a wonderful job. While the underworld, I think, was explained really well. I think the overworld, the Piltdown, whatever it's called, forgot to write it in my notes, is, I don't think, explained as well how it works. It's just kind of left in these first 3 episodes as that's where all the rich people are. And they're better off than the people down here. That's kind of the way you get it. I at least came away from the first 3 episodes, and also that they're pretty mean, because they're enforcers and marching through the streets and all the fighting and all the questioning people and and things. So you get a very negative impression, I think, of up there, and a better impression of down here, except for some of the darker elements in the underworld down below. So in general, I thought it did a really good job of introducing the world to us, these first 3 episodes, and it left on a pretty dramatic change. I wouldn't say a cliffhanger, but things were left like you don't know what happened. All of a sudden, you're set up for in this first 3 episodes. You're set up for this world with these characters, and then at the end of the third one, everything's changed. So, I mean, that's my general impression of these first 3 episodes. What about you guys?
Well, I know for me, since I came in only because of our recommendations, and not being the animated person, there was a bit of a, am I going to like this? Is this just my friends, telling me they love something, but it's just going to be another...
It's good, Kevin. It's really good.
Run-of-the-mill animated show. So it was interesting for me, and certainly on this rewatch, prep for these podcasts, eye-opening to kind of see it in a different light now, because watching the first couple of episodes the first time, there was a bit of a standoffish, all right, I'll give it a couple because it's friends, but watching on the rewatch, I just see so much more. And your point, Brent, about the differences between the worlds, as we know, is a big part of the whole season and series. It's interesting that I feel much more, or can identify more, with the folks in the underground area. And that's probably part of what they wanted to have happen in terms of how much detail they gave on one side versus the other as things are going to play out. Certainly noticing that in the first 3 here, for me, in terms of wanting to know more about each of those folks, from Vi and the gang, Powder and Milo, Clagger, go down a list there. There's a lot more of them, I think, that you're learning about than you will on the other side here in this first set. And I'm also very much was just struck on my rewatch. You mentioned it in terms of the way it starts off the beginning of episode 1, that there's no dialogue in that whole scene there on the bridge. I mean, you're getting the sense of what's going on with the characters and why you're going to want to care just by what you see, which is another example, as everyone knows who's seen it, of how beautiful this is, the work done to create this world. And the beauty in it, that certainly on a rewatch for me, I'm paying much more attention to a lot about what's going on in the background and the visuals of the buildings and other things. So that was definitely something that struck me as we were introducing, our gang and, the whole having to steal a bit to survive and what's involved and the dynamic of the folks in the little gang, as I called it in my notes, to who's doing what and how much Powder is being pushed to the side by many folks. And then we're developing it. But for me, certainly, and I think I remember sending a message to Brent and Wendy, because I know they had watched it at that point, an email or something, after I'd watched like the first 2, like, yeah, is this going to change? Because, this is okay, but it's not like something I'm going to feel like I'm going to be going through the whole season. Again, it wasn't negative. I was like, oh, this is kind of okay and interesting. Well done. And to their credit, they're like, just make it to the end of 3 and then make a decision. And oh my goodness, I have so many notes from episode 3. And I rewatched it a couple of times, even for this rewatch podcast, because my goodness, there's more happening in that episode, I think, than in many, sets of 3 or 4 episodes in other series. And that's why I really love this and wanted to have some discussions without hitting every plot point in terms of what's happening to the characters, what it means going forward for the rest of the season, how pivotal it is. Like you said, Brent, it wasn't a cliffhanger so much in the end of 3. But oh my goodness, it means so much in terms of what happened and what it's going to mean going forward, and how everything just pivoted and changed based on what happened, with how Powder was able to get her little monkey bomb to go off and what that did for everybody going forward. It's just kind of a wow, is my thought.
Yeah, so of the 3 of us, when I watched it the first time, I was the least thrilled with the story. I liked it, but I was not Kevin, who, went deep into searching for additional information. And I definitely had more criticism of the show. So when I went into this rewatch, I was like, I don't know what's going to happen when I rewatch this. But the thing that definitely struck me was right from the beginning. It's, this is a bleak world, and we're in the middle of the bleakness. So I did like how when you sort of push back and look at all 3 episodes together, we're sort of in the middle of a revolution that kind of stalled out for a while. And it's starting up again with these kids, potentially. But then, as you mentioned, when Powder throws the bomb, she disrupts everything, that trajectory, because it felt like they were setting up Violet's going to lead a revolution with, the rest of the lanes against the enforcers. But that didn't pan out, or at least not yet. And the other thing that I remember the first time I watched it was that opening scene where Powder's singing the song and she's got her eyes covered to not see the horror of what's happening. And we see Vander, with the cast iron boxing gloves on the bridge. And he throws down the gloves very symbolically, scoops up the kids and takes them back in retreat. And I loved how that set up really his whole arc. And he was one of the characters the first time I watched it, I was really interested in. And again, this time in terms of he really had the perspective of he was the leader. He was responsible for their own parents dying. He feels that responsibility. We later learned that he had this connection with Silco. They had some kind of, combat brotherly bond that went awry. And he's been trying to stabilize the situation with the enforcers by having this, mutual pact with Grayson, who's leading them about, you stay out of our stuff, we'll stay out of your stuff. So that was on the rewatch, that all made a lot more sense to me than it did the first time I watched it. I was really more focused on just how dark the lanes was, that these kids were basically a gang, a criminal gang, and that everyone around them was trying to survive in a very tough way. And then the one question I had coming out of the rewatch, it was very clear that the 2 worlds, Topside and the lanes were completely different. But I still don't understand how they're connected entirely. Like, is this the kingdom of Piltover? And like they have a bridge. So I'm hoping that at some point we'll have a little more understanding about that than I recall from watching it the first time, because this time around I was like, why are we even having this? Why does the Piltover even need the lanes, right? Are they just a drag? Like, what's the resource that you need to keep these people and keep them, oppressed, basically? But for me, as a first chapter and setting up things, I talked a lot about plot, but from a character perspective, it also captures these 2 kids who are caught up in the middle of the war, traumatized by what's happened to them. That's probably why when we get into more details, talk about the characterization overall. But it's an interesting point of view, because for me, I was actually on this rewatch a lot more intrigued with a lot of the side characters than I was the very first time I watched it. The first time I was basically focused on Violet as sort of my main point of view character. And on the rewatch, I was a lot more interested in, Benzo and Silco, and even, I wrote his name down. I think his name was like Dardek or something like that. The guy who gets juiced and turned into the Hulk. Even
I call him Bully. So.
Yeah. Even I was more paying attention to, when's he going to come back into the story? And I think I totally missed on the first time the monsters in the river that are circling around Silco's lair. So there's actually a lot of world building that they did in these first 3 episodes that I saw a lot more on the rewatch.
Yeah, and a lot more detail, I think, down low underground than there was up top. But I think we're going to get more of the up top as we go along in the series, from what I remember. So we'll get more of their background. But I did want to also point out some of the cool things right away that I noticed when I watched this the first time, and then was reminded when I watched this time. And one was Imagine Dragons. I love the soundtrack, and they have the intro song, the theme song to the entire show. So they do great. And of course, I believe later on in season 1 we see them in animated form performing, which is really cool. Yeah, I mean, being introduced to all sorts of characters. Echo, who's kind of, I don't know if he's actually the child of that pawn shop owner that you said you were paying attention to this time, or just he's just his guardian or whatever. But seeing him, and then later on, of course, his reaction when his essentially his father gets torn to shreds, and then going to vie for comfort and so forth was just very touching. So, yeah, just overall, just really loved the introduction to these guys.
Also caught me too on this rewatch now, kind of follow up what Wendy was saying, in that a little bit here of Jace and the magic, the hex tech, whatever we want to kind of see it there, and Mel kind of steering things for what we're going to see play out with the council and everything else. Reminded me, a long game. Setting some things up topside, if you will. So that was good for me to kind of go, oh yeah, that's right. That was getting established here, and having them just deal with the life they have down there. And the fact that everybody needs to be, very much like a big city, when you have your areas that are not anything like the top spots of town, and the community has to take care of itself. To a certain degree, it becomes even more important. We can see up on topside, Caitlin's mom, not wanting her to be anywhere near Jason, and this idea that you can decide what your kids are going to or not do. And when you're, on the other side of the world, all that matters is survival, and you've got to learn to do different things. Some may not be good things, just to be able to survive and get what you need. And then, so knowing what's going to play out with Silco going forward, you see right off the bat how harsh she is, and as you pointed out, Wendy, the what was at one point a brotherly relationship with Vander and he, and how that has gigantically switched, obviously, with what's going to happen in episode 3 when he's stabbing Vander, and deciding who's doing what. I mean, that's something that was definitely reinforced here. Is that idea of putting up with the divide that exists. Start off with what we saw on the bridge, but we get a lot more when you've got Silco talking to Vander. One of the quotes that stuck out to me is when he said to him, "You'll die for the cause, but you won't fight for it." And realizing the different perspectives that we're going to see play out a lot more in the next sets of episodes between characters and their decisions for how they approach trying to make things better. So it isn't that they all aren't trying to do something. It's that they're trying to do it in a way they see fit. And there are going to be other characters who just don't see that as the way to go. And sometimes it's like they've got a common enemy, but they don't want to align to try to get there. And as we see all throughout in season 1, we see definitely some of it big here in episode 3, but certainly what's going to happen in this world is very much this idea of, even when you have the best of intentions, it can go to total crap. And that impact that it has, right down to the absolute pain of watching what Powder is going to go through. And at her age that we see her here, when she realizes that as she kept repeating, all I wanted to do was help. And what she did basically killed a good part of her emotional found family and estranged her from her sister. And that's going to have, as we know, huge impacts going forward. I mean, that was just brutal to watch and rewatch.
Yeah, and especially how they sequenced it, right? That's always the most painful, is right, they're so close, right? They've
Yeah.
Clegger and Milo have just finally busted Vander out. The doors open, and Violet's fought everybody with those same cast iron boxing gloves, I call them. And they're gonna make it, right? But here comes Helpful Powder with her monkeys. The other thing I noticed on the rewatch, because it's related to this, was even when she was crossing the bridge, she was having visions where people would have scratched out eyes and stuff across their face. So I was like, oh, this is the starting point of that trauma that's going to carry through. And when she was talking to Violet right before Violet leaves to go, she's going to turn herself in. She's got really loud, ragey music. It's not blasting like it is later, but it's in the background as she's sitting there making her bombs again, which was a nice thing to notice in terms of seed planting for things that are going to come. I just wanted to add, because Kevin, you made a great point about people recognizing the negative consequences of good intentions, because Heimdegger, or whatever, I think that's his name, the council lead, I call him like their Yoda. He, although
very appropriate.
Well, he's that, and he's sort of Pinky from Pinky and the Brain, just because of the shape of his head. But he's the one who's saying, magic is dangerous. This is what led us to a huge problem in the past, which maybe we'll learn more about. And you have the aspirations of Victor as well as Jace. And Victor is the guy who came from the other side. He talks, and I forgot this, that he is the person who, he didn't get placed there. He wasn't plucked the way Jace was and put with a family that were his patrons. He scrapped his way all the way up to being the number 2 guy, and he's curious, which is often a problem with scientists. Where does the curiosity lead him? That was even more present. So they have set up some interesting problems in both Piltover and the Lanes, which I didn't even know the name of this place was called Mon until the rewatch, when Silco talks about that was going to be the kingdom of Mon, or their victory of Mon. And I was like, what's Mon? And then I realized that's the name of the place the larger place that they live in. So yeah, they've set up some really interesting problems overall between the characters.
Yeah, and we've touched on some things we really like. So let's dive in and just see if we have some like singular highlights, some highlights of these 3 episodes, some scenes, maybe some actions or things that we really loved. And maybe we'll just go around the table and each kind of throw one out and then just keep going until we're out of them. But I want to start out with I think one of my highlights was I really enjoyed that scene where at the end, episode 3, Vi grabs Vander's gauntlets and puts them on and just confronts those thugs, Silco thugs on that walkway, that, whatever you want to call it. And she's not just the first couple, maybe she got rid of pretty quickly, but then it becomes a real struggle, and just her just focus and rage, but well managed rage, and the fact that she could just beat so many of them. At the end, she has to run away, but she does a great job. And the only reason she has to run away is because this guy's all juiced up, and she has to get away and close the door and hide. But that whole fight, that really struck out to me as a great moment, a highlight. Kevin?
Yeah, I got so many, but okay, let me pick
well,
one.
We'll keep going
for this round. And I'll just say it again, especially on rewatch, the very beginning with the scene on the bridge with no dialogue. I mean, once you've seen the whole season and go back and see that and know what's going to be happening to these characters, does that hit hard for me?
Yeah.
Yeah, one for me was actually when Violet is in Benzo's waiting to get taken. She's going to sacrifice herself because they need to pin the whole explosion on somebody. And Vander comes in and talks to her, and that whole conversation, I just love that. He really is her father, surrogate father at that point, but he's also very much, the general talking to the soldier about the bigger picture of what's happening. It was, this is an animated show, but the emotions come across from both of those characters, and it's so poignant because they had been at odds up to that point. She keeps taunting him like, you won't fight. Why won't you fight? And he's trying to explain to her, but she's just not getting it. And he's already made his decision about sacrificing himself. So that was definitely one of my highlights.
Yeah, absolutely. All good ones. I would also say, and Wendy touched on this, another highlight for me is Powder's first breakdown that we've seen. And a hint of being crazy, too, in her breakdown. Before she realizes and sees and is reminded that she has those crystals. And she's like, I can help. But that whole breakdown is just so evocative of what happens later in the series and what she becomes. And I thought that was just a big highlight of these three as well.
Yeah. Yep, I would agree. And also, the way they did such a great job when you have characters of the different levels of emotion. When we've got the big fight, what's going on? Vander has to, take the shimmer, take the juice. And with everything about to, basically go even worse, he's the one who jumps out, scoops up by, jumps out. He's dying, or appears to be dying. And he tells Violet, take care of Powder, just as she comes around the corner and is so excited. It worked. Did you see? I'm like, oh my. I mean, talk about the range of emotions between some characters there. That is just painful to watch.
Yeah, it's all about the timing, right? The other one that I wanted to point out, and it kind of ties back to Brent's comment about later seeing Powder's kind of crazy genius come to light, was the opening heist, because we already have the seeds of Violet's pushing her, right? Violet's like, I convinced you're ready, but she knows she's not ready, but she's a little kid. She can't really push back on these older kids. They did a great job of showing so much of the dynamics of this little gang in the middle of this heist. And I thought that there was going to be something that would actually come of the tip sending them to that apartment, because on the rewatch, I was like, why are they in this particular apartment? And they're like, oh, we got a tip from some little man. And it turns out, I think it was, right? It was Silco pushing them to go to that apartment.
Well, when they said little man, I think they're actually referring to, what's his name?
Or was it Echo?
They called him little man.
Oh, that's right. And then Echo talked about somebody posh came into Benzo's and he followed him home. And that's how he picked out his mark.
That was probably Jace, right? Because Jace would have not been afraid to go there to get something he needed, right? Because he was trying to be secret.
Yeah, because he had all that illegal stuff, so probably.
Yeah. Wendy, did you do one just now?
Well, that was one of the highlights. I can add another one, though.
Oh, I've got more too, so go ahead if you want to add one.
Sure. No, go ahead.
Okay. I just wanted to, and Kevin kind of hinted at it when, they left from the building, and unfortunately Vander really did appear to die. Later on, just after that, we had that whole emotional scene, obviously, between Powder and Vi, where Vi just explodes at her and then just walks away. But what the highlight for me was when Vi comes to her senses and then sees Silco with Powder and wants to go save her and go back to her sister and save her sister. And instead Marcus, the enforcer, the scumbag Judas enforcer, the one who got paid money to betray them, grabs her and takes her away because she, in her weakened state, I guess he could do that. Otherwise, I don't think he could have if she was still strong. But takes her away. But that's a highlight for me because that is such a turning point. Because if she had been able to save Powder, Jinx may never have been, right? But this set up the existence of Jinx. We saw it right after that, where she, the Powder just basically falls into Silco's arms and says some great lines here. She's not my sister anymore. And then he says, "It's okay. We'll show them. We will show them all."
Damn. Because that's all foundational to what will help to create Jinx for that reason. Because she will think she was abandoned by Vi for quite a while. And even when she gets a chance to talk to her later on in the series, it's too late. And that's where a show does such a wonderful job of giving you these different perspectives, and the characters aren't aware of these things, no matter what the intention was. As far as they know, as far as at this point Powder knows, she's just been abandoned. Her sister is just abandoned. So, and we know as viewers, like, no, let her see, and it's going to be years before that gets to come back. And again, it's just something to really watch it play out again and realize. And Wendy, as you mentioned, just in terms of where. And this is where I saw some just wonderful videos on YouTube, just looking at mental illness and understanding abandonment and the impact at certain ages on the characters to help build her. And there were already some issues there with, when she got so upset when Vi wouldn't let her come to their mission, so to speak. And she's getting, physically upset and everything else that's going, and her brain is already going into some dark places that are going to get even darker. So it's little things that we get to see here early on that we know are going to lead to much bigger things.
Yeah, and it was so interesting parallel between Silco when he's talking about his backstory, because he made similar kind of comments about the person that hurt you the most, or the poison river that he fell in, was actually the transformational thing. And his response to everything is personal, right? He wants vengeance against Vander. Even though he talks about wanting this kingdom, this separate entity, the reason he wants to bring this fight to them is to make Piltover respect them as a legitimate threat, so they'll stay away from them, leave them alone, basically. And Powder is always responding out of the interpersonal, right? It's everyone's view of her. She overhears people talking about her, and Powder, Vi is constantly trying to tell her, no, you're okay. She also says something similar to her as Silco did about, we'll show them all, we'll prove them wrong. So it was very interesting to me how she makes a choice very quickly. She just got abandoned. She just saw her father die. And it's like a switch was flipped, that she makes this next choice, which is also evocative of sort of how she swings from one thing to the next in the future. But I do blame Violet a little bit. I definitely judge Violet in terms of
she's short-tempered.
Yeah, and especially because the last thing Vander said was protect your sister.
Yeah. Any more highlights?
Yeah, but we could go on too long. We're only in the first 3 episodes.
I have one low light. I want to point out one thing that I thought really bummed me out when I saw it, and that was the death of Grayson. Because I was really starting to like that character. The older enforcer, the one who had the deal with Vander.
Yep.
And of course, I love the voice actor, and I'm not even going to attempt to pronounce her name. Wendy might be able to pronounce her name, but she's great. But I was really bummed when she died.
But for me too, it was interesting, and I agree. But that was certainly a great narrative piece to let us know ain't nobody safe. Because you're watching the show, you're intending like, oh, this is gonna be a main character. This is gonna be great to see what plays out over. Not that losing Vander wasn't also, or the boys, so to speak. But yeah, but when we saw that, I was like, oh goodness, we are gonna shake things up bad.
That actually ties into one of my other highlights, which was the relationship between her, Grayson, and Vander, because they are kind of the two people keeping the pins in the grenades between what's happening. And so she kind of has to die also, because it's got to create this vacuum that bad actors are coming to fill.
I didn't even see that symmetry. You're right. You're absolutely right. They were the two holding back the flood, and they both died.
Yep. That's why everything went to crap. Or is going to in the coming episodes.
Yeah, we're on the tipping point.
Yeah, we are. And it's tough.
I did have one other low light,
Sure,
if you don't have one, Kevin. It's actually about how the magic worked, because when I rewatched it and Victor and Jace are whipping up the machine and they stabilize it and then everything starts working, I was like, what am I actually seeing? I still don't really understand what I saw. They're
A
flying
zero gravity
around.
zone, yeah.
Yeah, it's like they're floating around, but I was like, what am I actually seeing? Because that didn't look anything like the portal that the other guy opened that saved Jason and his mother. So I was sort of like, your magic explanation is a little bit shoddy, but maybe we'll get more.
I think it was just because it was something extraordinary. It didn't have to be exactly what we saw before or as well controlled, but it was extraordinary that it made everything float. I mean, that's magic. So.
Yeah, true.
Yeah, and it's just the beginnings of it because he's trying to.
I mean, the good news is, though, of course, that one counselor came in. Mel, is that her name?
Mel, yeah.
Came Mel. In because she had given them, I give you one night or one day or whatever. And she came in just as, Hummerdinger was thinking about, he's like, well, yeah, but it's he was kind of dancing with, this is impressive, but it's dangerous. She came in and said, I think it's great. Let's talk about it.
Yeah, let's talk to everybody about this.
Yeah, let's have a new era of magic. And that's when he says, no, it's hex tech.
Of course. Technology, yeah. All right, well, I think one thing I want to ask you guys is, and maybe we'll ask this every time in these 3 episode chunks, characters. Do you have a favorite or favorites just from watching the first 3? Who were your favorite or favorites? I am really, I can't say who my favorite of the series is because she's not really exhibited her favoriteness yet, if that makes any sense. So I'll save that for later. But I think in this one, I think you're right. I think I might agree with some of the things Wendy was saying. That Vander, just for the role he was playing in not only being the fatherly figure for them, but keeping the peace, was probably my favorite character in the first 3. And I was really bummed to see him go. But I also mentioned Grayson. I really loved her. But if I had to pick one, it's probably going to be Vander.
Yeah, at this point, folks who have heard me talk on panels, podcasts, and so forth know much I love sister relationships. Shows like Lost Girl and Winona Earp and others. So I very much attached to Vi and Powder here, empathizing with the older sister who's still pretty young, and as we talked about, sometimes snapping and not having the best long range thinking before doing some things, and having great intentions. And then the younger sister, and so I think maybe for me at this point it might be Violet, it might be Vi, because I mean she also, even with the problems she caused herself a little bit, especially towards the very end, she's still constantly supporting her younger sister, telling her things like what makes you different, makes you strong, trying to let her know that she'll kind of grow into things, the encouragement that someone needs at that age. And I really appreciated that relationship. It goes horribly long at the very end of episode 3, but you can tell that she really wanted it, which is going to lead to a lot of great discussions later on in the season in terms of how disappointed she's going to be with what happened when she wasn't around to help.
Yeah, for me, the first time I watched it, it was Vander, and in this rewatch, it was kind of Vander plus the girls. But as I was listening to Kevin, I was actually reminded of the speech that Vander gives Vi about you're the leader, you can get them to do things, so you need to make sure that you're watching out for them. And that weight of responsibility is part of her problem, right? She doesn't want that. And, and she is a kid too. So it's understandable. You have people who are just fundamentally not capable of dealing with the things that life is throwing them because of their age and lack of experience. But so for me, it's Vander for sure, especially because now he's gone.
Yeah, that has a lot to do with it. Yeah, they're great. Don't get me wrong, and I think it's probably true of all of us. There's a lot of great characters in this show, but yeah, we were trying to identify in these first three what really stuck out for us. But in general, I think we could just talk a little bit more about the show if we want to. But of these 3 episodes, one thing I was excited because I know what's coming later to see the introduction of Caitlin. Because spoilers, she's my favorite character of the whole series. But to see her introduced, but she didn't do much. She just kind of played as a counterpart to Jace, right? In the beginning was with him when the apartment exploded, and then later on, since she's the daughter of the patron family, her mother telling her, stay away, telling him stay away from my daughter, sort of thing. But I really dug that, and in general, the cool nature of those crystals and the power within them. And I don't know if it was ever explained, but I kind of want to know where Jace got them. Did he say where he got them, or how did he ever come across those crystals? I know he was given the one little one by the magic user that saved, the arcane user that saved him and his mother, but how did he make the others, or how did he find them?
I'm not sure of that myself.
I don't think they explain that, but they have to be fairly common because Victor was like, we're doing this just with these crystals. Like, he didn't seem to think they were something exotic or amazing. So I'm guessing they're around.
Okay.
Interesting. Now, something to have to kind of pay attention to see if it's there some way.
Yeah. Any other thoughts, Kevin? Or Wendy?
Yeah, the only other thing for me, certainly that based on our conversations that, I've really noticed on the rewatch side of it, because by the end, again, we spoil anything, folks, in season 1, the relationship between Silco and Jinx, the fatherly position he appears to be in and some of the stuff there. Seeing him in these first 3 episodes, what a bad guy. I mean, he is just, coming up with new drugs. He's the drug dealer. He's the kingpin. He's willing to kill anybody, sacrifice anybody towards his vision.
At the end, he had a knife out. He was going to kill Powder.
Yeah.
He's
exactly.
like, and there's the last daughter of my enemy. I'm going to kill her.
Yes, that was my other thing to lead to, which was, until she totally just fell into his arms crying, he was going to offer. and then knowing where this is going to kind of go, it's just so fascinating to see that. And again, just some amazing videos on YouTube, looking at the whole show, or even the reactors as we go through. Some great stuff there, like there are for many shows. But in terms of talking about that idea, and there's so many people who would go on these little diatribes about, the Silco father relationship and how flawed that is, and you shouldn't even consider that as a way to support. And I'm like, I get it. But seeing some of the foundational stuff here, it's like, oh yeah, man, that is just, don't want to be anywhere near him, and he's going to play such a key role.
Yeah, well, as someone who loved The Sopranos and Breaking Bad, I definitely understand flawed father relationships.
There you go. He lines up well with those.
Yeah, but actually, Silco was one of the characters that on the rewatch I realized was much better developed than I thought when I first watched it. I was like, oh, he's just kind of the totally evil guy.
the bad guy.
But he actually does talk about a couple different times when he's right before he gives his test monkey the big dose, and then when he's talking to Vander, he has reasons. They make sense. It's not just the personal attack of him, but when he talks about, we were gonna have this revolution, and the way that you win is to do the most worst thing to your enemy that you could possibly imagine. And so he's got that strategy mind that means you are going to be doing ruthless, unthinkable things that the average person would find unthinkable. And it was really interesting because he pulls that knife out. That's a knife he killed Vander with. It was also the knife that Vander stabbed him with. So, that weapon's been around. And he definitely was surprised. And the people around him, the reaction of the people around him when he raises his hand and they're expecting it to be the death blow. And instead he, embraces her.
Hmm.
Yeah, that's it.
And you start to think about whether that's him using his twisted mind to go, I can use this to hurt them even more, or if it's some way a redemption path he sees for himself.
Does he have emotions? Oh no!
In that moment, I assumed it was a play to get Violet, right? To have leverage over Violet,
or to the ultimate, getting back at Vander.
Yeah.
I can convert your precious little daughter to be my daughter and my, right-hand person.
Yeah.
And that's going to lead to an awesome scene, much later in terms of him.
The finale
referring to the idea of to the daughter side of it. So it's great stuff. Great stuff.
One last thing. Right. Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say the way Silco is portrayed here. One thought that occurred to me as I was finishing up the third episode rewatch was, no wonder Vander tried to kill him. If he was this kind of guy all along.
Yeah. But he probably knew that his intentions were for the sake of the lane's good, but man, is he doing it the wrong way in his mind, Vander's mind.
Yeah, I could see how they were partners, and then he realizes, like, oh, that's a bridge too far. Mm-hmm. But what I was going to add, the last thing I was going to add, which is not related to Silco, was the opening credits. When I rewatched the opening credits, it was like, wow, you just told me the whole chessboard right here.
Ooh. I don't think I studied them visually that much. You're talking about visually, right?
Yeah, there's a great visual image where it has Vander with the two girls, and then rising above it is Silco. At the very end, it's the two of them fighting. The other piece that I noticed a lot on the rewatch was just the use of the pink and blue colors in different places.
The powder colors, yeah.
Mm.
Yeah. Excellent. And we haven't yet gotten to Jinx, played by
next episode.
Played by an actor that we love from the Fallout series, Miss Purnell. But Vi being played by Haley Steinfeld, is that her name? Who from Hawkeye, the new Hawkeye. So there's a lot of great. There are a lot of great voice actors in here, which is really cool.
Mm-hmm.
All right, Yuri Lowenthal,
and also Jace is played by the actor who was in True Blood. I'm forgetting his name.
Kevin Alejandro.
Yeah.
Yeah, and also in Lucifer.
Yes.
Very cool. All right. Well, do you guys have anything else to add, or are we done for this first episode? Just for podcast, I should say.
I'm done. I am just excited now to move on to the beginnings of Jinx.
Yeah. Next batch. Wendy, you good to go?
I am done.
All right. Well, then I want to thank all of you for watching and listening, because we are also uploading this to YouTube. Thanks for being here, and thank you, Kevin and Wendy, for showing up, and I'll see you next time.
Yeah, catch you all next time.
Take care, everyone. We'll see you soon.
Bye-bye.